Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under the topics of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. I'm the creator of a practice called Wild Soul Movement. My flagship year-long online women's circle is called Power. I run virtual new moon circles every month, weekend workshops all over the planet throughout the year, and I work with clients one-on-one. I also started doing stand-up comedy for fun in 2018. So this is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. There's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show also aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. The main intention here is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths, and they trust in themselves and in life and recognize that we need each other. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here, and here we go. What's up, everybody? This is episode number 323 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto. Today, I'm here with my friend Nikki Innocent, and whenever I go to events or conferences, I don't try to meet the most people. I try to meet the right people. So it's usually just 1 to 3 people, and today's guest was one of those people from an event I attended in 2018. Nikki's big truth was around it being the right time and place right now for anyone to be here in this particular vessel, creating change in one way or another. From there, we talked about bearing witness to other people's stories, what it brings up for us, and how to be with discomfort when it arises. We're also both communication nerds, so we spent a good bit of time getting into the difference between tone policing and methodology, self-policing, the many polarities we live in, cancel culture, what progress actually looks like, and conversation stoppers. Things like deflection tactics, how people can take accountability for their actions. We got into the components of a real effective apology, which is not something a lot of people just are naturally really good at. So I appreciated that we got to explore that. And also how to embrace and show up as who we are now as we grow. So if you're a fan of nuance, context, and complexity, you're going to love this one. Share it up. Let us know what lands for you. The show notes are at untameyourself.com/323. And since it is November now, y'all, I'm excited. We're at 2 months away from a brand new decade. I know there's a lot of memes going around like, you only have 2 months left of a decade. And I'm not about that. I'm about, we're only 2 months away from a new one, right? I mean, I'm not like a rush to the finish line and that kind of person. I'd rather take this time to create some beautiful momentum, start out the new experience with like whatever it is that you want to start out with, intention, purpose, ease, grace, focus, whatever, clarity. So this year's Journey into the Wild Soul, those of you that have been listening for a while know that every year I dedicate the last 6 episodes of the year to take you on a journey into the wild soul. We do a pop-up Facebook group. We gather as a community. That starts later this month. If you want all the details for that, get on the wait list for Power 2020. Go to wildsoulmovement.com/waitlist. And as well, when you get on that wait list, I'm going to send you my brand new Wild Soul Movement Embodiment Bible. So obviously the core of all of my work in the Wild Soul Movement world is embodiment, right? Helping women get out of their heads and into their bodies and all of the amazing things that become available to us in our life when we're more connected to our bodies. Of course, it's not about leaving the mind behind, but really integrating mind, body, soul, for sensual living, for more creativity, joy, pleasure, connecting into that body wisdom, trusting yourself, learning how to discern what your yeses, your nos, your truths feel like, all these things that I talk about a lot. Well, I put it all into a downloadable little Bible for you so you can get started. There's some real, me, I'm really practical, real specific things that you could follow, some tools, some practices, some insights. And the only way to get that right now is when you join the Power 2020 waitlist. So go to wildsoulmovement.com/waitlist, grab your Wild Soul Movement Embodiment Bible, and also get excited about power. I know some of you are really, really going to love it. I'll be sharing some of this year's women's stories with you over the course of the journey into the Wild Soul as well. And whether you join Power or not, it is still always exciting to hear what's possible for people. One of the things that I asked the women in their feedback survey for the year what was the most surprising thing to you about the experience? And I love their answers, because their answers usually have something to do with, realizing that they were capable of something that they never thought they were going to be capable of. So we'll be sharing that up in the next couple of weeks. And that's pretty much it for now, y'all. Let's get into the episode. Nikki!
Elizabeth.
Oh my God. There's no warning, by the way. People who are listening just got screamed at in their ear by me.
Hello, everybody. Just be ready. The laughter is going to do the same thing for your ears. So
they should be used to it. So yeah. I love before I hit record, people listening or watching, I said to Nikki, is there anything you need to know before we get started? And she goes, I have a lot of truths. And I'm like, well, you came to the right place.
Right. They're truths, but are they small truths or big truths or,
I don't know if they're small, I don't know if they're big. I don't know if they're all connected to the same root of the big truth.
Yes.
So we'll go there. But everyone listening, this is Nikki Innocent. I mean, I did a whole intro already, but I love Nikki. I met, some of you have heard me allude to this before. Every once in a while, I feel compelled to go to something, and I'm like, this doesn't really seem like my scene, but I'm going to go. And it's usually for like 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 4 connections. It's always for the humans. And so I went to something in May of 2018, and Nikki was my primary human that I got out of that experience. So I'm super glad I went. Now, you know what? That one had a couple. That one had like 4. But I'm not going to lie. You're my favorite, which is why I'm not saying the name of the thing, because we don't need to make other people feel, but not that people care. Not that people are like tracking all that and being like, I wasn't your favorite. Hopefully no one gives a shit. But
hey, that's all right. That makes me, I felt my chills of truth through my body on that. I felt like such a hot mess that day. And so for you, and you saw me through all that crap, that I was like, yep, she's one of my people.
Yeah, I went, I volunteered actually at this event. I'm like, because of what was going on and the things, I was like, you need someone to do energy clearings between sessions? I've never done anything. Like, a lot of people don't even know I do energy work. Actually, when I reached out, that person was like, you do? I'm like, yeah. And they were like, yeah, that'd be great. And I'm like, okay, I'll come. I'll come for that. So, then you were one of my sessions, and I was like, hello.
And it was my first experience with any kind of energy work. I was... And you actually, I can't remember the exact words, that you're like, we're going to do this again sometime.
I just knew we would.
Yeah. And I trusted.
And then what happened?
Trusted. And here we are.
You came to the Wild Soul Movement workshop in Boston.
I brought your mom. Yes. Jean loved it. She was all about it.
It was so great.
Yes. I hit her right at one of those times of like, saying yes to things. And I'm someone that'll jump into like any new thing. I meet new people, try new things, stretch myself, make myself uncomfortable, extrovert that needs silence and introversion to gain some energy. So I don't really know how all that works. Right. But my mother does not like to enter a room of not knowing people. And so her coming from that place of yes, we've heard that before, but just her openness and willingness to kind of trust me and trust the space of we're going to try this new thing. And it was for Mother's Day, which was also incredibly beautiful.
That was an accident. And you know what? I think I did it again next year. I think I'm running a weekend on Mother's Day. And I'm like, I kind of like it though, because then, and a lot of the women in the room were mothers. And they were like, this was actually my gift to myself. I thought that was cool that for Mother's Day, some mothers were like, I'm with my kids all the friggin' time. I'm going to actually go do something for myself.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
like, good for you.
And a lot of, what was, upon reflection, a lot of that work was, so much of that was rooted in being a mother, your relationship with your mother, the future of whatever mothering is, that it felt so, I don't know. I don't know if all of the workshops are like that, but it did feel like it was so centered around the mothering that we have within all of us one way or another. And I just thought that was beautiful because, again, it's a whole bunch of strangers I don't know, but we all connect through the beautiful femininity that we can bring to a room. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And, it's fascinating. We had a woman on the podcast a couple years ago, Bethany Webster, and her work is all around the mother wound. And it's fascinating because that's not my specific work, but if we're working with the body, which is the extension of nature, we all come from a body. Like a lot of our relationships to our bodies come from seeing how our mother experienced her body. Like we're talking about mom stuff all the time. Comes up a lot at those workshops. So, and it's no secret that my relationship with my mom has been something that's brought a lot of healing into my life. So of course we teach what we need to learn. So speaking of bodies, how's your body feel today?
Oh, my body was feeling a little rough earlier, but I decided to give myself some calming meditative time. I took an extra shower to release all the stuff off my body.
Nice.
And I'm feeling so much more grounded in myself. Also, I had to make sure to hydrate. Sometimes I forget to do that. And so just even that first big gulp of water sounds so basic here, but was so important to just feeling more whole. So if you aren't hydrating today, do so. Yeah.
Basics matter. Are you using this little blur the background function on Skype right now?
Yes. Does it look good?
It does. I was interviewing my friend Jada Selner, who her interview will have come before yours.
Yeah.
So if you blurred your background, I'm going to blur mine.
Oh, do it. Well, you know why I'm doing it?
Why?
Because my normal setup, I can't use it because of the noise.
Oh.
So
I just think it's fun. So and most people are listening anyway, but if you're watching this on YouTube, now you get this little...
It's like portrait mode. You're welcome.
So this little
Don't
magical...
pay attention to any blemishes.
This little magical effect.
Yeah.
So, and then, okay, you said you have a lot of truth. So I'm going to ask, what's a big truth that's having an impact on your life right now? But feel free to tell me as many of your truths as you want to.
Well, there's a couple truths that are from this same stem. And so I'll pull from the one that was coming out of the workshop that we, the Wild Soul Movement workshop, was around the idea that your existence is meant to be at the time it happens, in the place it happens, and in the vessel of you with which it happens. And so this whole idea that you are on this earth for a reason, your existence, your soul, all of that is here to make change one way or another. Hit me in a bunch of different ways during the workshop, but I do think it's a lot of what has moved me through the last 4 or 5 years of life. This idea that just by initially it was allowing others to share their stories and their existence and their being and helping them as a marketer in that, right? But then, over the years, I've gotten more comfortable in sharing my story and owning and holding my space. And so I've witnessed both the experience of somebody's existence shaping and changing me and really transforming my ability to see the world. And then I've also had this experience lately of just existing and sharing things about myself that seem like they're nothing, and having people reach out to me and say, thank you. I thought I was the only person. I thought I was going crazy. It hit me at just the right time and just the right moment, your story of X, Y, and Z. And those kind of things that I feel like when we're in the deep recesses of, I don't know if anybody has these anxiety moments when you're about to go to sleep, but when I'm trying to calm my mind, a lot of times that's where you get into this whole thing of like, who do I think I am? Am I that important? Is it me that's the problem? Whatever, wherever your anxiety is coming from. And this idea that we can create space to reiterate the fact that like you are meant to be here for a reason, and you don't have to control anything to be enough. Just by being here, you are enough. Is something that is so, I feel it through my whole body right now. The heat's coming. It's so true, but it's also something that has been such a struggle for me over the years that it's something that I continuously need to reiterate for myself. So the Elaine Welteroth's book, More Than Enough, I don't know if you've, it was, so I am biracial. She is biracial, and her experience of sharing her story of being a biracial woman was amazing, because there were so many parts of it that I was like, oh, thank you for putting that into words. But also there were so many parts of it where it showed how those categories that we live by and things that are such prominent aspects of our identity, they can differ from person to person to person. And by sharing that, it's important for everyone, whether you do identify with that particular identity or not. So I guess my truth is, sharing your experience and living your life as fully as you are able is transformative, and a transformative and rebellious act in itself.
It's so amazing. And one of the first things that you said in there, which is so huge, is timing, right? Who you share your story with and when. You just never know, right? These episodes, we talk about, there's some common themes that come up over and over and over again. But I don't know who's heard every single episode I've ever done, and that particular day, for whatever reason, is the day something finally lands. Or this could be someone's first episode. Maybe you share it with your people and someone never heard of me, and we're talking about something and they're like, oh man, might be the 17th time I've had the conversation on the podcast, but it's someone's first time. Yes. So it's like that trust that if I feel compelled to use my voice, I should use my friggin' voice. Yes. Obviously with the asterisks, as long as I'm not out here being an asshole trying to oppress people.
Right. And that's infringing on other people by doing stuff like that. That's not sharing that's power over.
Not weaponizing, right? I think about that too. Like anything can be used for good or bad, harm or good, healing, helping, or harm, all the things. So, that book is in my queue. I do this thing. I don't know that I'm ever finishing any books ever again. Do you finish books still? Okay,
so here's the thing. I have spent a lot of time getting to know myself and being okay with the things that I'm not good at.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I'm not good at is reading a hard copy book, like giving myself the time and the focused energy to sit down and go through a book. I mean, right now I have White Fragility right next to me, right? Right next to me, it looks like it hasn't been opened. It's been opened a little, but I've listened to the entire thing.
Yeah.
Because I've learned that, again, the way that I absorb so much information and why I enjoy podcasts and why I think it's so important for us to use our voice. My marketing company is called Story and Voice. And it's literally how I view the world of being able to share your story and use your voice. So much of us have either had our voices silenced, we've silenced ourselves, we've been told we're too loud. And I think the thing for me is that a lot of times in hard copy, you don't get the human essence of the book. And I find a lot of the stuff that I'm reading now, and I guess listening to now would be a better way, whatever. The humanity is really important. And it's really interesting that I didn't even think about this, but the White Fragility was one that I listened to a week and a half ago or so. And it was really interesting because I first started listening and it was an extremely monotone voice and it drove me crazy. I was like, this stuff is too important for us to act like it's nothing. Right. And I was like, and it was bothering me, but I know at this point, so this is something that I feel like it should add to, of like sharing your story is important and also receiving it at the right time. Sometimes receiving it at the right time means that it makes you uncomfortable and means that it makes you angry. It makes you feel something. And that doesn't necessarily mean you got to shove it or do anything like that. What I ended up doing was I'm listening to it. I'm like, okay, I'm noticing this is bothering me. Why is this bothering me? And initially it's like, oh, they did this wrong, blah, blah, blah. No. Why is it bothering me? And so I realized that I needed to take some time to understand why somebody's tone of voice about something that is so, I'm feeling it right now, is so passion filled for me, is something that like, it's specifically talking about whiteness, and it's something that we as a society don't talk about. Like, I can't sit here and just say, yes, and this is what it is. Like, it's something that I feel so passionately about. And to hear a voice speaking it so calmly and like rationally, and it felt as though initially devoid of emotion, was like opposite of all the things I was feeling. And then I realized, oh, there's an intent in this that is, a lot of this conversation can get distracted by the policing of tone and the policing of emotion. And that to understand the reality and to operate within that reality doesn't mean you accept it and say it's okay. But the point of that is to get the message across, right?
Yeah.
And I don't believe, I mean, you and I have talked about this before, that specifically the social media space allows for a lot of just like frivolous tone policing and all this crap. But I do think that there's a part of it that if we're aware of how these patterns work, we can actually leverage them in a way that we can be heard within the chaos that can be the systems that we're in that have told us that these particular topics aren't talked about, or that we should get so upset that we should turn them off, or we should put the book down, or we shouldn't talk about it with those around us. And so I guess that, the part of this that was so interesting for me is taking the book to the human level and then having the human level of this book not feel human enough for me. Being like, wait a second, that's their job, isn't to make this book enough for me. Right? It's I'm coming to this book knowing what it's all about to be a student. And so they might not deliver exactly how I want it, but it's my job to figure out, is this helpful? What can I learn? And is it moving me towards being the better version of myself and having the language with which I think is so important to operate in the world? So a long-winded way of answering your question about do I read, but I do find that if you're having a hard time reading books, listening is really important. And then there's also the part of me that I'm trying to work on, that I like to multitask. So audiobooks are wonderful if you want to be walking, or you're driving, or you're cleaning, or you're doing something else. I have a really hard time sitting down and just reading a book and not feeling like I should be doing something else or my mind wanders.
Yeah. I've been actually, when at the time we're recording this, it's the week before the podcast comes back after I took my summer break. But in that first episode, one of the things that I shared was I realized myself about books, that certain types of books I want to listen to. I want to have the physical hard copy, and some things I could just read on my Kindle. Literally, some things I want all three.
Yes, that's what
So I could take it. It could always be accessible to me when I'm traveling, whatever, memoirs and stuff like that. I don't want to read that. I want to hear the person read it. I want to hear their voice, right? Like storytelling, memoirish types of teaching things. I usually want to hear that. And then I also recently just gave myself permission to stop trying to read dense text. Something, whether that's like historical or scientific. I'm not wired for that.
Yep.
I'm not taking it in. I'm not going to finish it. That's just not how I learn.
Yeah. And you're tiring yourself out in the process.
1,000%. Yeah. It's just like a waste on many levels. So while you were talking, this is how my brain works. I'm just going to share it because I can't help myself. And I think you'll think it's funny.
Of course.
I just want to make you happy, Nikki. As you were saying that, I was imagining if Samuel L. Jackson read the audiobook for White Fragility, and it was making me
stop it. Oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, I feel like I should just open a page and read it like motherfucking snakes on a motherfucking plane. Like,
oh my
come
God.
on.
Don't do it.
I won't do it. I'm going to ruin it.
Like, so I couldn't help it. That's where my brain goes sometimes.
So good.
On a related, this is ridiculous, and I'm going to tell you anyway. last night, there's some things. This is really funny because I sent my brother a voice note to be like, "You're the only person in the world I could tell this to because it's so silly." And now I'm going to tell you, Nikki. And in the act of telling you, I'm telling everyone who listens to this friggin'
Everyone.
show. So
Yes.
recently, I canceled my membership to Equinox, the gym that I was going to. It's like my fancy. It's one of my like bougie indulgences in life, and because one of their big investors was throwing a friggin' campaign party or fundraiser for Donald Trump. And I was like, well, shit, I can't indirectly fund that. So I've been looking around to see, what gym I'm going to go to now. And Venice Beach, which is right over here close by to me, has like I don't know if it's like the original Gold's Gym or they just call it like the Mecca of Gold's Gym because it's like where Arnold Schwarzenegger used to work out back in the day. And actually, I think he still does.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's like the to use a stereotype, like the meatheadiest of meathead, like type of place. I mean, I've belonged to Gold's gyms before and like other
Yeah.
places, but it's not like you go and it's like a normal gym. But this is like so like muscles on muscles and probably steroids and God knows what else. But I couldn't help myself last night as I'm driving. I'm driving home from salsa dancing. It's like 1 a.m. And
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, I'm thinking, wow, wouldn't it be funny if Arnold Schwarzenegger terminated Donald Trump? Why? Why does my brain do this to me?
I don't know, but like as the Terminator.
Yeah, like a
Yeah.
celebrity death match. Whatever. We don't need to talk about it. That's
Well,
just,
you
to
know,
me, that's similar to being like, man, can you imagine if Samuel L. Jackson read the audiobook for White
it just
Fragility?
like it just came out of the air, and you're like, I'll just think about this one for a
I'm just going to
minute.
think about this and giggle and
Yeah.
then move on with my life. So,
Well, and then you think about right that I mean, it's not too. I mean, there's the reality of that, but like Donald Trump comes from a reality TV based world, so it's not that crazy that this full blown, all for dramatic
right.
effect entertainment of like squashing
Well,
and
and
you're
Arnold
fired
Schwarzenegger was
person.
a
Like,
politician for a hot minute. Like,
right,
listen, there
right,
were all
right.
these little threads that are the reason why that erupted from my mind grapes. So, and if you don't watch 30 Rock, that just means my brain. So now that we can, what I like about giving myself more space and a longer time to be with our guests, which I'm doing now,
Mhm.
is I can take people on a little bit more of my ridiculous tangents if I want
That's-
to. But
mhm.
let's bring it back to something actually worth listening to, which is if anyone doesn't know what tone policing is, can you explain it, please?
Oh my goodness. Well, you know who I feel like does a better job than me would be Dr. T. I'm not. I
Yeah.
wouldn't call myself an educator in this game here.
Should we look it
Um,
up? Do you want me to look it up and we can read it, or are you
we can look
comfortable
it up. I mean,
defining
he
it?
just did. Oh, I'll tell. How about this? I'll tell you how I view it,
Yeah.
and I will not call it the definition.
Okay.
But it's funny. I just had this conversation with somebody very close to me, and I speak a lot in metaphor. So if I go there, just join me. But tone policing is it's a tool of silencing. It's a tool of gaslighting, of kind of undercutting a conversation that can make you uncomfortable. I shouldn't say you. It can happen to you as well.
Anyone.
They make people uncomfortable. And a lot of times, instead of paying attention to the message that you don't necessarily want to hear, discuss, allow to be in whatever forum it is, you start picking at the way with which the message was delivered.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was delivered too loudly, too softly, too high pitched, too emotionally. It wasn't delivered at the right time in the right place. It was attacking someone. You have to be kinder. You have to be gentler. Those are a lot of I just wish that you would focus more on love than
The
pain.
positive. This is so negative.
Yeah. And a lot of that, there's a whole bunch of words that go into, I'm sure, that define every little offshoot. But it really is this idea of kind of canceling out the message that is on the table to make it more comfortable, remove the discomfort, focus on the issue of volume, or focus on the issue of
presentation,
kindness of tone with and that's such, I can think something's kind and you can think it's awful. So there's such a kind of subjective dynamic in that. And a lot of times the goal is to remove it, but a lot of times it's to just silence the person.
Yeah.
And if you dive into the interwebs of this, or I do recommend Dr. T has a wonderful post about, actually, I think he did 2 or 3, but he's actually going to be on my podcast, and we talked about this wonderful infographic he just came out with, all about tone policing. So if you want to go like super deep into it from somebody that's got a doctor in front of their name, he is definitely a place to go. But, you know, I welcome people to really pay attention as they're aware of these dynamics to who it's happening to.
Yeah.
As a viewer, right? Not just diving into always, like really allowing yourself to, now that you're aware, that's the first step, to allow yourself to actually view and reflect and understand and educate yourself about how it plays out in the world. I think, you know, we can all talk about these like anecdotes, right? These kind of watered down, we're going to, you know, X, Y, and Z person and A, B, and C person have a conversation. But when you watch it actually play out in real life, you'll see a pattern of not only what is said, but how it is said, how forceful and violent some of the language can be in response to things that people don't want to hear. A lot of times it's in conversations about race. Especially in our country, I think, you know, we have this deep 400-year-old history of racial segregation and oppression and violence, and it's never really been discussed on a large scale. And so I think a lot of times we feel like we did that week of civil rights and Martin Luther King in school, and now we're all healed. And I mean, come on, if we're living in 2019 right now, you know that's not a reality. So, not only understanding the word, but also watching how our systems and structure, how the tool weaves itself in and out, and it's like, oh, it's like so smooth.
Yeah.
And it's so familiar that you really do need to take a minute and like really allow yourself not to make a snap judgment, but just to watch how it happens.
Yeah.
And simply notice, you know, it's the whole mindfulness practice of like really noticing how it's happening, when it's happening, and you don't necessarily need to act right away. I think the more you get accustomed to how it all works and how it plays out, and I do encourage you to read some more about it or listen some more about it. There are people that have been doing work about this for a long time and have great direction on the path forward. And then, you know, I always feel like it's really important to feel it in your body, what feels right for you to do. Don't just do something someone else does, because it's going to be really hard to have that solid foundation in something that's going to be difficult one way or another.
Yeah. You know, this has been one of my benchmarks for myself in my own learning and education around a lot of things, right? That to take in the information, I should not need it to be presented in any particular way, tone-wise, right? Which is different from kind of what we were talking about earlier with books. I know how I learn, so I might not choose to follow someone's Instagram account to learn that way. I might want to go to a weekend workshop with them, right? Be in the room, be in the space, be with other people, be in an immersive experience. I learn better that way. Right? So me choosing not to follow so-and-so on social media isn't because their shit makes me uncomfortable. It's because that's not how I'm learning. Yeah. Or it's like distracting or draining, or like that's not going to be the best use of my time or get the end result or the outcome being I want to learn, I want to do better. Right? So like those are two different things. But the tone policing thing is so fascinating. And some people's energy that they have to put towards trying to get people to adjust their tone so they could be comfortable is unbelievable. I'm like, just listen. You become a better listener regardless, like, of how it's coming at you or like what the energy is, or go listen somewhere else. Right. But why? Like, who is anyone? Like the inherent entitlement of someone who's going to come at someone else and be like, I really think that you should be saying this way. Get out of here, you know?
Well, and I know
Go
I do
somewhere
it
else.
too, right? Like that, I think that as you see these things, you become more compassionate about the experience when you see yourself doing it, because
Yeah.
it is so ingrained in how we operate in this world. Unfortunately, and fortunately, because if not, we wouldn't be able to see it and say it and do something about it. Because if we didn't have this tool, there would be another tool doing the same thing somewhere else. Um, but I do think kind of being a little bit more forgiving with yourself, because it's it's been taught generations over of how
Yeah.
we do these things.
Yeah.
And I do think that we'll see it in others, but it's hard to really take the steps forward when you're, especially if you're a person that is considered when you're talking about something, is considered the norm or the majority. But I really at this point, I forget what Dr. T called it. I loved his language. Damn. But like when
We'll
you're
put the
considered
link to your interview in the show
yeah,
notes.
yeah, yeah. But he talked about this idea. It wasn't kind of minority. He used different words, because I think we use a lot of majority minority language. That
Dominant or non-dominant? I like that.
yeah, yeah,
And I think I learned
yeah,
that from him.
yeah. But just this idea of what normal is, right? And this, if you're operating in the normal, you don't even notice when other people aren't normal like you. And so a lot of times when you're actually diving into the discomfort of seeing past the blinders you've been living in, there's a lot of emotional responses that'll come up. And there's going to be a lot of things that you notice that just come out of your mouth like a reflex that you may not have intended. I mean, in a lot of the diversity and inclusion work that I do, like that's the stuff. Like that's when the stuff comes out of your mouth without thinking, you shouldn't be shaming yourself and beating yourself up about it. You should be using it as a data point for, oh God, that's not what I believe, and that's not how I want to operate in this world. Where's that coming from? How can I do something about it? Rather
Yeah.
than beating ourselves up and shaming ourselves and kind of this cancel culture on top of it.
Yeah. And there's also there's I'm all about like the nuanced details and context, and often leads to complexity, which is that some people, the reason they're having the reaction to the tone is because they are traumatized in some way, and they have a history of abuse, and that's the way their abuse was delivered.
Yeah.
So that's also
Yep.
kind of a thing where someone might be like, I'm not going to interact with this. But again, where I think the difference is, it's our responsibility to be with our own triggers. We don't need to say to others, you should be saying this differently. I could look at something and be like, oh, damn, this is triggering me because being yelled at or being perceived being yelled at reminds me of being yelled at as a kid growing up. You know what I mean? So
Right.
we get
Yeah.
to take that and go, got it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily say to someone else, stop yelling at me. So
Yeah.
there's a difference though too, which I think is a nuanced difference. And I've had conversation with friends about this. I have a few friends who are really, really like evangelists for a particular teacher that I can't get into their stuff. I'm not into it. And I was just asking questions about like their methods and whatever, because I'm a teacher. Like I love frameworks and like how people teach and how people facilitate. My questions were about the facilitation. And my one friend got really uncomfortable, and she's like, I feel like this is tone policing. And I'm like, cool. I could give a shit if this woman wants to stand in my face and scream at me, right? But in terms of like facilitation and holding the space and also being considerate of people's trauma and people's experiences, to me, abusive behavior is different, right?
Yeah.
Vetting for abusive behavior is different than tone policing. So,
Yes.
bunch of nuance. I want to share something with you. I saw
Yes,
this post yesterday. So one of the things that I want to do in 2020 is I want to invite more men back into these conversations. I needed a
Nice.
break. Nikki.
Mm-hmm.
And I also got tired of having to delete men's interviews from my podcast. I've had to delete so many when I'm like, oh man. And listen, this is a dominant group thing, right? Inherent in people who occupy dominant groups are going to be, some biases, some entitlements, whatever, lack of consideration for others. And this isn't a space for that. This is a space for considering others. And people know that they can come and feel like, okay, this person acknowledges that I friggin' exist.
Yep.
So, but anyway, I made a post on Facebook the other day. I was asking for some male leaders who are doing the work, blah, blah, blah. Got a whole bunch of recommendations, mostly white dudes. And I started following some of these people. I like to give folks the benefit of the doubt, but I really operate under that, fool me once. I always mix this up. I can never say it. Shame on you, right? Fool me twice, shame on me. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so,
It's the same sentiment. Yeah, I got
started following some of these people, and I read this post. I'm going to read this to you because I want to know how you feel
I'm
about
excited.
this. And then I'll tell you how I responded, which, surprisingly, went ignored.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't get deleted, though. It said, progress is hard to make when the threat of being canceled is always looming.
Mm-hmm.
We have to raise standards, yes, but we also need to create loving space and make grace available for mistakes and miscreation. Nothing great happens. So, wait, let me not inject myself. Nothing great happens when good people are paralyzed by the fear of judgment.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. So my favorite is the but, way up front, like started real early. I think there's a part of this that's so, it's so interesting. I talk a lot about the fact that we live in polarities and like you're either glorified or you're vilified for contributing to conversation or existing one way or another. And I mean, to me, it's so wonderful that we are in a world right now where we are able to shine a light on things that have been in the shadows and causing pain. Again, I think that there are some things that have caused more pain without being delivered in a way that's even just a heads up to some people that might be triggered by something. But, I think one of the aspects of this that seems to get lost and also the words cancel culture, which I used earlier, tend to be used again as like a shortcut to stopping the conversation and to deflecting from what I think is so important, which is accountability. I think it is really important. And I believe that I'm trying very hard myself. This life that we live is a journey, and we're always learning and we're always making mistakes and we're falling on our faces sometimes and we're saying the wrong words. Like, I get that. We're human. But I do think that the part that we miss in this, oh, this person did this bad thing, get rid of them. They don't deserve to exist in their profession anymore, which I'm not advocating for the fact that they don't get there isn't an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But I think that there's this space of, okay, I'll go away for a while and I'll say sorry. And it's kind of the sorry, not sorry, but I'll say sorry. And I'll come back in 6 months. Are we ready yet? And it's like, that time isn't.
Are you ready? What did you do in the last 6 months?
Right. And there's a part of this that, like, I mean, it's a PR culture too, whatever. Like that your press release will cover your ass and your apology statement will be vague enough and kind of apologetic. And, oh, I hope everything's great and sunshine and rainbows. But I do think that there is something so important in taking accountability for the impact that your words and your actions have in the world. And not saying, oh, I'm sorry you felt that way. Or, I didn't mean it, so it didn't matter how it hit you. And, we can go in this whole intent and impact conversation, but it really is just taking responsibility for the actions and the words that you put out. And I think that, the way I talk a lot about this is like, if I walked around swinging my arms around and I just kept clocking people in the nose and I broke a whole bunch of noses, but really I was just stretching my shoulders out. My intent wasn't to hit you in the nose. Would I say, oh, I'm so sorry you think your nose is broken? It's like, oh, shit, I broke your nose. I'm so sorry. I won't keep moving my arms around like that. And that is on me for not being aware of the space around me, for not understanding the force with which I express my need to loosen up my shoulders. It's this whole idea of, oh, that happened to you. And it takes all accountability away from the action that created it. I think that is a really important thing that we have now. We have now shown the light, and we have had some sort of rallying consequence. And then we lose. We either lose interest or our news cycle goes to something else, and there is no time for accountability. And I think accountability is not just a one moment process. It's if you see that I broke your nose, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I just broke your nose. I know my arm did that to you. Really understanding and seeing the impact of what you do, and not saying, oh, that didn't happen, or you think that happened, I see it differently.
Right.
But then also understanding different ways to interact in spaces and learning, I'm using this metaphor that's kind of shitty, but sorry, like learning how to loosen up my shoulder if that's what I'm doing. If I'm like,
Right.
oh,
You don't
I
need to
need to
throw
keep
your
moving.
elbow. You can roll your
Right.
shoulder out. You don't need to throw your
Right.
friggin' elbow.
And sometimes there are spaces to do that
Yeah.
aren't in such close proximity to hurt people
Yeah.
that are vulnerable to your practice.
Step
And
aside.
so, yeah, I
Be
think that
considerate of other
accountability
people.
and responsibility are so important. I like roll my eyes at myself. The listeners can't see that, but like in so much, so in the podcast that I have, I talk a lot about stories of other, and in so much of these conversations with all different people coming from all different spaces, working in all different avenues, I find myself asking a very similar question, and it's funny because it's not like a template for me, but it's most of the time it's like, okay, it's one word that's around whatever topic we're talking about, and tell me how you feel like that's been changed over the last few years, and how when things become part of the social consciousness, they get diluted. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like accountability and responsibility have become that, oops, sorry, that's not accountability, that's not responsibility.
I love memes that say things like the real apology is changed behavior.
Exactly.
Or no longer accepting verbal apologies in 2019.
Yes.
Right? Because often we're apologizing for how our actions and behaviors impacted someone. So, hello, it's going to take action and behavior to repair, to actually apologize. Anyone can say, I'm so sorry. Their behavior will actually show you. So after all these
Tell
things
me yours, yes,
that you just said about accountability, do you want to hear the comment that I left on this thread?
Of course I do.
I wrote, so here, wait, let me read it again. Progress is hard to make when this threat of being canceled is always looming. We have to raise standards, yes, but we also need to create loving space and make grace available for mistakes and miscreation. Nothing great happens when good people are paralyzed by the fear of judgment. By the way, this is kind of tone policing in and of itself, right? So I wrote, yes, and integrous people who don't fear accountability are willing to be judged. I don't care. You can judge me. Judge me all day long.
Yep.
Right? I'm not afraid. If I mess something up, I'm gonna post it. I'm gonna share it. I'm not gonna try to hide it, sweep it under the rug. I'm gonna be like, I messed that up. Thank you so much. Hey y'all, here's what I learned. Let's not do this anymore. If anyone else can relate, you know what I mean? So it was so fast. I unfollowed this person after this post, and I was like, well, he's off the list.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not canceling him, but he's not coming on my podcast. Because that kind of thinking, get the hell out of here. What that is saying is people could make more progress if they weren't so afraid of being judged. And they wouldn't be afraid of being judged if you all who are speaking out against things wouldn't keep canceling us.
If you just stop judging us, we wouldn't be afraid of being judged.
Thing as the, I might botch this quote. What is it? People who are accustomed to privilege, giving up privilege can feel like oppression to those who are accustomed to it. Mm-hmm. We're literally just asking you to have an experience like every friggin' one else. And, I'm going to give you, if I asked you to guess what kind of person wrote that post, you could guess.
You mean the demographics, yeah. Yep.
The demographics, right?
Yep. It's likely the group in our society right now that, and this isn't necessarily that particular group, that when I'm having conversations about diversity and I'm having conversations about lifting people that haven't had a space, it's what about men? What about the white man? There's this white male shame right now. Shouldn't we be focusing on that? It's like, sure, someone else can focus on that.
Someone else can focus on that.
But in this, I'm saying but I think in this experience, it is important to, I think one of the things that I felt so strongly was, it's not cancel culture, but it is the ability to release yourself from having to receive that information in a way that in your Instagram feed or in your whatever social media feed is taking up space in your day, in your mind, in your life. And I think we, for some reason, because it's so easy and because it's become so, it's a scroll of a phone in an elevator or whatever, we don't give the weight to this kind of exposure that we really should, because it does impact you, whether you are interacting via comment or not.
Well, and then here's the signal, right? Nothing great happens when good people. The word good is like,
yes.
How good are you really? Like, if that's what we're all out here trying to protect our goodness, I don't know what to tell you. Some of us are not good sometimes.
Yes.
Doesn't
Well,
mean.
and really, we're not good. We're not a good or a bad person. You're a person who does things that some people might subjectively think are good or bad.
But I'm a good
And you
person.
can. Yeah.
And the thing
Yeah.
is, this is what sparked me to write a post about how this thing does not translate into that thing.
I loved that post.
You could be super like, okay, great. I'm so glad you give so much money to charity. You appear to be a good person. Someone comes to you and says, you did this thing that hurt me. And you're like, I'm sorry, you feel that way. I don't see it that way.
Yeah.
The goodness has flown out the window and no one gives a shit how much money you give to charity. You know what I mean? Like this generosity doesn't translate into that you can listen, that you could be compassionate, that you can apologize for real, that you could do repair. So there's just, all the things. What, tell me, I'm actually really blanking, and I do apologize for that.
I'm gonna
specifically on what is the name of your podcast? Something other.
Oh, yes, it's called Checkbox Other.
For some reason, I'm thinking hashtag other. It's checkbox other.
Yes, checkbox other, and the whole idea behind that is that if you are in any way demographically ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when you were growing up, you had to fill out all these forms to identify who you are and where you fall in groups. And there's an insufficiency of them boxes, I'd say.
It's funny that I forgot this because this is the story of my life. It's like, are you Caucasian, Hispanic? Like, I'm like.
And you got to choose one, right?
And then it's like other. And I'm like, other.
Yeah, other. And then there's this tiny little line. You're like, well, that's not going to cut it. And so, this was actually something, the name of it, I actually didn't know it was going to be a podcast. It came in 2017. I was in LA, and I was super sick the 2 times I went to LA for this. I went for an event. Oprah did a soul sessions kind of thing, which is a wonderfully, inspiring thing. And you're around really great people. And of course I was like deathly ill, and they were like, if you could not cough because we're doing a video. I was like, sorry, I can't control it. But like, you're in that space,
if you could just press pause on your bodily functions because we're recording.
Well, they didn't, it was one of those things we don't want you to have gum. I get it. But like, you want me to have this Jolly Rancher so I'm not coughing to interfere with this amazing thing that's going on. So sorry, I'm just going to keep like it's an illegal good that I'm popping a cherry Jolly Rancher in the middle of this. But I was by myself. I was staying at a friend's house and super sick. And I was really just trying to figure out, I was like, I have so much to say personally, but also so many other people have so much to say. And it was right after the election. And I felt like we were all in this space of feeling like we didn't belong. And I know, especially after how the election went, I was like, oh crap, I don't know that I belong in this country if this is how this country believes, right? So that was like big kind of existential stuff for me. Like I've never questioned my Americanness before. But I started writing down like all these things that I feel like I should talk about that are things about my life that I feel like haven't fit. And I was like, and the way that I work as a marketer is if I can't find a name for something, I just start. And I used to do this when I did marketing consulting with my clients, I'd say, okay, get a Google Doc or a journal or whatever. And like, if there's a word that feels like it aligns in any way to what you're doing, just put it on there. It doesn't have to be the name. It doesn't have to be, just put it on the piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And so we can go back and see the trends, and maybe there'll be some sort of, inspiration that comes from that later. And so I started writing these things of like, okay, I'm a child of divorce. My father is a Haitian immigrant and my mother is a white woman from Long Island. And I grew up in Connecticut. And so not very many people knew what Haitian was. Everyone thought it was Asian, and people didn't understand what a biracial relationship was. And also they weren't really together. So it was kind of, I was the product of it. And then one parent would come and I didn't look like them, and the other parent would come and I didn't look like them. So that dynamic interesting. Being an only child, but also not being an only child. I grew up for 11 years of my life as an only child. My 2 parents and then my siblings were born. So like having this dynamic of what siblings are all about, being a creative in a very, very stuffy business space. I was in investment management, private equity, management consulting, and trying to be like a creative person in that space that's very analytical. And so like all these places where I was trying to fit into a mold that didn't fit and check a box, right? Having to answer like, who are you today? And being like, I'm me, but there's no box that's me. And so this idea of the only place that ever felt like it kind of fit was this box that really meant I don't belong in any of these. So I'll check that. And the thing that's been so interesting is talking to other people about this. And like initially I felt like, oh, I mean, this is my own thing. And of course, like I feel like I don't belong. But then you start talking to people like, oh my God, that's my life. Every single person has said, that's me, which is beautiful because it's funny because again, part of me is like, I'm kind of tricking you a little bit when you're listening to it because you're listening to it and people are talking about how they felt alone and isolated and different and they didn't belong. But the point of it and the experience of it is that you hear their story and you get it. Whether you are fully the same exact experience of them or not, you understand that feeling and that we as human beings all have that striving for belonging. We all have those experiences in life where we feel like we don't fit and someone might find us out or we're trying to do one way or another. So the checkbox other is something that has been beautiful. I mean, it's brought so many incredible humans into my life, but I think again, it's creating that space for stories to really make transformation and to make change.
So just yesterday, I was interviewing Betsy Murphy, and I don't know if her interview is going up before or after yours. I don't have the editorial calendar in front of me, but we talked a lot about storytelling and all the different ways and all the different levels on which stories invite people into, just like what you said, have their own experience validated, acknowledged, or witnessed, not feel alone, or learn about an experience that they never knew existed, get some compassion. I remember many years ago, this was the summer of 2013, I went to this 5-day training thing, similar to Landmark Forum, but it was called MITT. It was here in LA. And on the first day, people are introducing themselves, saying why they're there, what they're hoping to get out of it. And then they're having people share their stories. And a lot of people were sharing stories of trauma and abuse. And something really clicked in for me. Seeing the people, this is LA. So a lot of these people were like Hollywood people, very well put together, very beautiful in the sense of being socially acceptably beautiful, wealthy, right? And some of these people you're looking at going, for real? That person has that experience? You would never know.
Yeah.
Never know. And even that, right? For people who feel like they are disheveled or broken or can't get their shit together, to see that someone somehow has managed to be, again, I'm going to put this in air quotes, like successful while having similar experiences, there's just such a wide range to exist, to use the word that you used earlier, with all of the varying experiences we all have. So it's fascinating to me too in the terms of like potentiality, and also to look at, in self-help and personal development, often you hear people say, what is the story you're telling yourself, right? Like, so you're telling your story, but then there's also, everyone's story is also in some way, shape, or form kind of manufactured, right? Because there's a perception, there's an interpretation. So I also like to look back and go, do I want to edit how I've been telling any of these stories?
Yes.
Like even on this podcast, for a really long time when I described my last relationship, I had been describing it a certain way. And then recently, like I went through a big healing threshold this summer. I was like, it happened and I need to acknowledge it happened, but I don't even want to talk about it. Like, I don't want to describe it. I don't even want to give it the energy that those words I've been using to describe it hold. So I'm just going to, like, I've started just being like, I was in a dysfunctional relationship. And at this juncture, because I've done some healing, a lot of healing, and I'm through so much of it, that's not a minimization. But early on, it would have been. So I'm curious, as you do this storytelling and sharing work with people, and it's very much ingrained in your work, how do you feel about that as stories evolve and change and we see ourselves and the stories differently?
Well, if anybody has been in therapy in their lives at all, I think that that experience has given me a lot of forgiveness around my own ability to understand the narratives I've been living with. Brene Brown calls it your shitty first draft that you've been operating within. And a lot of times, if it's deeply rooted young stuff, you're doing it from a 5-year-old brain. To really understand like where that's coming from, where that message is coming from. If there's pain there, where is that pain? Is that pain still present in your day to day? All of that work in therapy, I think, is so important. But the reason I say that is that you go to therapy in order to learn how to shift something about your life. So you're, at least personally, I shouldn't say you, I don't know. People go for different reasons. I know in many times, I've gone in various times when I was younger, on and off throughout. But it's when a story that I'm telling myself about myself, or I'm telling the world about myself, or an identity that I've been living in doesn't feel like it works. And I can't explain it away from myself. I can't read it away. I can't whatever, because whatever wonderful protections I've built up within my normal self are not allowing me to see that I need to understand where that first draft came from, and really then take accountability for the fact that I'm an adult and I can write this story the way that I want to. And the way that I really am living, or I'm really feeling. I don't have to carry, something that my parents brought to me because of their experiences, or something that my school, that I was surrounded by a lot of people that didn't look like me, had me believing about the world. And so therefore I was just operating that way because I didn't even understand that kind of osmosis happens. And so really giving yourself the benefit of forgiveness to rewrite and really refine. And I would say
I like
polish.
the word refine.
Yeah. And I say polish, but I also think a lot of times when you're polishing, sometimes you're making it more rough too. So like it feels a little bit off, but giving yourself that forgiveness, because this life that we have is a journey from start to finish. And, I don't know. I always say this, which, it's funny because when I was doing a lot of, the coaching work and the D&I work initially, I was always like, I'm not an expert in this. And people would be like, you have to say you're an expert. I'm like, right. But to be an expert means I've stopped learning in my mind at that point. And I don't know all. And I will never know all, because all is constantly changing, especially around a lot of this work around identity and belonging and creating spaces for people to show up as themselves that for years and years and years it's not been allowed. And in the depths of people's souls, they feel like they don't have a space to speak or exist. And so really coming to the table and saying, I'm a student. I can be curious about things that maybe don't feel right, or that I said before that really, really felt right. But now I'm saying, well, that's not me. That's not me anymore. And, it's not this idea of delusion, right? It's not this idea of delusion. It's not this idea of trying to convince you, or gaslighting, that the sky is red when it's really blue. It's this idea that we are evolving humans. I mean, the whole idea, right? It's like every 7 years, all your cells change. Like, to believe that all your beliefs are going to stay consistent, or all of the things you say about yourself are going to stay consistent, is, to me, unrealistic, and also just really unfair. It's an unfair standard to put on yourself. So I don't know. I think that there's a part of this that there is some I'm speaking as the person that beats themselves up, or has beat themselves up about making that change. It is really important to give yourself some time and space to understand where that story is coming from. And then you can decide whether to keep it or release it. I think that that's really important. And I actually do the same thing. I did a TEDx talk about breaking the rules in your life and then rewriting them. And it's the same idea. It's like, have you been operating some way just like on autopilot and not really understanding why or what it's doing to you? Like, give yourself the room to identify, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but really notice what that looks like and how that feels. And then if it really doesn't work, when you get down to the kind of the brass tacks of it, you can let that go, and you can write the rule that feels more like who you are at this point in time. And that rule also can then change 7 years, or, not even 7 months, if that doesn't feel right for you. Again, I say this with this feeling of, this is not a tool for deception. It's not an excuse for misleading people, or misleading yourself. But it is this idea that as human beings, the idea is that we continue to learn and grow. And so to think that we're going to be stuck in all our stuff is limiting, and it's pretty unfair to yourself to live that kind of life.
So the last thing, this is actually a good segue into the last thing I wanted to ask you about,
Yeah.
which is, in my world, in embodiment work, how do you know
Mm.
when you've outgrown something? You feel it. You feel it
Yes.
in your body's going to let you know. And obviously we always put the asterisks on things depending on what's going on in your nervous system, trauma, all these things, right? But when you're in a regulated place and you're feeling into things, your body will let you know. You made a post just the other day, and I was so amped. I was so excited to see
Yeah.
that you are integrating embodiment practices into your work now.
Mm.
After coming to the workshop, I was so freaking pumped. And it was funny because I just saw the initial thing that said something about the body in like the picture on Instagram. And I hadn't read the thing, and I was already like, yes, Nikki is using embodiment tools in her work now. And then I read the thing, and you had actually tagged me and said, like,
Heck
I
yeah.
appreciate that very much. But I was like, oh, this is so amazing. So I'm curious, in your work, how are you integrating? Because I think embodiment amplifies and makes everything more effective, more intimate, deeper, more thorough, responsible,
Yes.
and considerate in a lot of ways. I'm obviously
Well,
biased.
well, I'll say that I didn't have a choice in building it into my own practice for myself and my own learning. And I feel like when I am putting things out in the world, again, understanding that my actions and my words have an impact one way or another, I feel as though I have to be very thoughtful about what I'm kind of recommending, portraying, saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of this stuff is stuff that I've gone through and worked through. And I try not to do it when I'm in the heat of the moment, because a lot of times that'll be my reaction to that will be coming from a whole bunch of places, which again, I'm trying very hard not to self-censor, but I will say that this embodiment stuff is like so old, but also so new in me.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up playing sports, and being an athlete was probably that would have been the box that I could check without any kind of thought process. And so my body was always I was told it was very solid when I was younger, which as a girl didn't feel particularly feminine. But I took ownership of the fact that I had thick thighs and I could hold my own on the soccer field. You come up, I can box you out in a basketball game, no problem. I'll get that rebound, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so actually this came up in the Wild Soul Movement workshop too, but like I had growing up, my body was such a huge part of my identity and my strength and my ability to really just feel foundationally sturdy. And then when I stopped playing soccer, I played soccer in college and stopped my junior year, which was really unfortunate. Soccer was like breathing for me. I started kicking a soccer ball around probably in my crib. And so leaving that was an identity thing. It wasn't just a sport I stopped playing. And unfortunately, the dynamic when I went to college, it took all the joy and the beauty of soccer away. It was a very toxic environment, and I don't use that word lightly. And so that experience and it was severed, and I'm not much of a quitter either.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up feeling like I had to leave in the middle of a season.
Mm.
I had an injury, blah, 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 blah. We can go into that, but I won't. And so leaving that was a pretty quick break of my identity and my relationship with my body and myself. And I was going to my school. I went to Bentley University, which is focused on business. So like super analytical, mind focused stuff. And so I immediately felt myself being like, okay, if my identity is no longer an athlete, not that I thought when I was finishing school I was going to go play professional soccer. There's a whole lot of reasons for that we can go into societally, but that I went like full throttle on the mind. I was always getting good grades. I was always doing really well in school, but it was kind of a balance there. And so I like abandoned, and we talked about this in the workshop. Like I felt like from like my chest down, I disengaged from it. And so that career life went on and on and on until about 4 years ago, where everything was about how smart I was, how much I could think through problems, what I look like, making sure I could cover my body up to be appropriate in a corporate atmosphere. I'm a very curvaceous person, and that is not okay in corporate America. I don't actually believe that, but that's the message that I felt like I was receiving. And so really just suppressing my body as much as possible. And I even, in a therapy session, we got to a point where I actually had gained weight specifically so people wouldn't look at my body. So I took up more space, but I didn't want, my breasts and my ass to be catcalled and whatever. So without even really realizing why I was doing what I was doing, I was trying to minimize my body in a whole bunch of ways. And fast forward to, I had left my corporate life and started my entrepreneurial life. And I thought like, oh, we're good. We're great. We're cool. And I still was all up in the mind space. I had this experience where I started getting a lot of strep throats about probably 6 years ago, but I'd never had any problems before. And if you do any kind of chakra or body work, like a lot of times when you're not able to use your voice, they manifest in physical ways. But I didn't know that. I was like, oh, the vehicle of my body is not working. I need to take it to the doctor to fix this, fix whatever parts you got to fix and let's keep going. This vehicle needs to work. There was no real respect for my body. And
it's just like
worked.
Maintenance.
Yeah. And it was like, thanks so much, body. Let's go. Like there was no consideration of actually what it was telling me or what it needs. I had a lot of gastrointestinal issues, was always like, oh, this is an inconvenience. Figure yourself out. And so it went from there to throat. And I would be like, all right, give me the antibiotic or whatever we needed and move on. And finally I went to the doctor. They gave me an antibiotic and my whole body had a full body like anaphylactic reaction. And it was really bizarre. And I felt like, again, I've questioned my use of the words that I use, because a lot of times you think of like anaphylaxis where you need to get the EpiPen and stab someone immediately or everything's. Mine was this like slow moving, again, I am not a doctor, so I'm going to mess this up, but it was a very slow moving experience of just my whole body starting to swell up and my throat closing slowly. And I actually sat there and watched myself in a mirror and was like, you're going to stay open. Throat, you're going to stay open. So my mind was trying to tell my body not to have this allergic reaction to this medication. My whole body was covered. I went to the doctor the next morning because I didn't want to go to the emergency room and inconvenience people that have to help take care of me. And the doctor was like, what are you doing? Like, you should not have waited this long. Like, go to the doctor next time. I was like, I know, but I figured it out. Like, I was sitting there. I wasn't wheezing fully. We were good. And she was just like, no. And that was the moment where I realized, like, what am I doing? Like, my body is a huge part of my existence right now. And hopefully through the entire time that I am a living being on this earth, my body will function in the ways I need it. But I've completely ignored it. And so that experience was one where it was extremely humbling, but also like, what have I been doing? And so I started doing a little bit more of just attention to what my body was telling me, but I didn't trust it because I had trusted myself as an athlete. I trusted myself on the soccer field, but I had disengaged. And so those muscles, and that's a very literal word, but like the ability to trust my body, I had abandoned that a long time ago. I was trusting my mind wholly. And so it was getting a new relationship with my body. And, girl, that workshop, the like getting on the ground and swaying my hips around and like getting my feminine energy and really being okay with all aspects of my body. I've been doing a lot of work around like the visions and the images you see of girls in bikinis and having to look a certain way. Like I've never really been super insecure anyway, but it's definitely part of our everyday exposure. But I think one, your workshops, two, your dancing online has just been like a wonderful, beautiful thing for me to see the expression of somebody that is loving and enjoying and their body and just the expression that your body can have every day. Like, get out of here with that. Like that, again, somebody's story, somebody's experience, somebody's generosity and sharing can be so transformative. And so that's my personal aspect of it. I've now realized that like, to make transformation, if you want to stay here, you want to stay in your mind, or you want to just focus on your soul, or you want to just focus on your body, you're not going to actually make a larger change. So you really need to incorporate all aspects of it. And I'll tell you, like, my embodiment stuff that I'm doing is super basic. In that post, it was, and I was so surprised. It was a wonderful woman named Talisa Daughtry, who was in my workshop. And it was just about like taking a minute and paying attention to your body when things feel right. Tell yourself a lie, tell yourself a truth, see where it falls, go. Because what we were doing in that workshop was talking about the rules at work that don't work. And really understanding what feels good and what doesn't. That doesn't make sense. What feels good and what doesn't. And a lot of times, especially at work, like you have a handbook. And when you're at work, you're trying to perform. So like you have the answers already. So you might actually be saying something like you believe it and your body will be telling you differently because it's been so conditioned in your brain. And so it was a very important part of breaking down the mental barriers that we've built up to keep ourselves, I'll say, oppressed in the workplace. It was, around millennial women and how millennial leaders and the shift of a larger millennial demographic in our marketplace will bring with it the need for change. And so that was a very important part of this, what could be very cerebral, right? It could be a very mind-focused experience. It was really important to bring it back down to the body because our body's holding a lot of the stuff that's creating it.
Yeah, I was I've been planting these seeds with my mom for many years, and she recently told me a story of deciding to step out of doing something she thought she was going to be doing for quite a while. And this was literally this morning. And she was like, I listened to you. I took your advice and I listened to my gut. She's like, because the last time I went in there, my body was practically screaming at me to get out. And I was like,
yes.
So this isn't just for healing and all this deep work, the day-to-day stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Body is telling you, giving you information. So I love to hear that.
And it gets louder, right?
It gets louder.
The day that the time that we met, that workshop, or I'm sorry, that experience, there was a panel that happened, and I referenced a bit of it in my post, but there was some stuff going on that felt misaligned with the opportunity that I saw to really make connection and transformation happen. And I found my whole body was shaking. I couldn't sit still. I had to move seats a couple times during this as an audience member. I had to get up and move because I was like, I can't do this. My teeth were clenched. I had literally my hands were, I had white knuckles, and I ended up getting to a point where I had to stand up, and I was like, okay, I need to stand up, and I'm going to go say something. I'm going to ask a question because at this point, I need to ask a question. And it was crazy because if my mind took over, I wouldn't have been allowed to do any of that. But the ruler in the mind would have been like, sit down. We can handle this. Yes, this doesn't feel good. But my body.
Suck it up. Push through.
Yeah. My body was like, let's go. We got to do this. We can't sit this way anymore. And so it feels kind of a little bit like a movie where the spirit took you and you didn't have control over your body. There was a bit of that experience. It was like, oh, if I don't pay attention to you, you're going to start doing things. And you're actually telling me what I need. And I've been ignoring it for a while.
One could argue that was your soul, but we're not going to go there right now.
We work together.
So it's Checkbox Other is the podcast. And then what is your website and what is your Instagram so people can find you?
Well, it's super easy. I have this name that's pretty memorable. So it's Nikki Innocent. I've had a lot of comments ever since I was a little kid, anytime anyone looked at my ID or anything like that. So Nikki, Nikki, and then the word innocent, the opposite of guilty. You can find me on my website, NikkiInnocent.com, and then at Nikki Innocent on all other things.
Thanks, Mama.
Easy.
Appreciate you so much. Everyone listening, share it up. Find Nikki.
Yes.
Use this as a conversation piece with your friends, all the things that we always suggest that you do with the episodes.
And because we talked about a whole bunch of things, if you have books and stuff that you have to recommend, please feel free to drop them to me over social media. I am always looking for wonderful ways to hear more stories and learn new things.
Cool. Thank you for that. All right, y'all. We'll see you later.
Me, the work that I do is soul fulfilling. So there is that part of it, right? But then I also know when I'm not charging enough, it gets to the point where I'm depleted. And I know the instant I start resenting a client call or a call that I got to get on, that something is off. Either I'm giving too much or I'm not getting compensated enough. And that's something I have really learned from you as well.